All right. Hey, everybody. So this is Josh Bruce, and we're going to sort of continue down the path of playing with this string file. Before we do that, though, I do want to kind of update some of this stuff because I did some research offline to try to figure out how to get sort of these two panes down here at the bottom, as well as how to color the terminus. So I came across, as I was looking for something that would allow me better manipulation of groups, right? Because everything that has a tab is considered or called a group. And so basically and that's because it can hold multiple tabs, right? So it's effectively a group of tabs. And what I came across was a package called Origami. And so if I come in here to install package, Command Shift P, and then install package, and just type in Origami, I can say Origami, and it should be installed, which means that it's up here in the view underneath the dictionary, which is not where it used to be. And what it allows you to do is you can create a new pane, you can travel to a new pane, which is just going to take your cursor there. And I'm not really digging the Command K keyboard shortcut to activate these things, so I'm probably not going to use those. But you can also destroy panes, right? And then we can create a file that's in a certain pane or a different pane, and then carry it to and from different panes. And if you want to play with it, you totally can. We can also save layouts and come back from saved layouts. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make this do this in like 2 moves, right? So one, I'm going to change the layout to the grid, and we talked about sort of the limitations of the grid, and I'm going to move this down here. I'm going to close the README, and I'm going to move the string file up above and the main down there. Right, so we're good to go there, and then basically now I'm going to go to Origami and just say destroy current pane, and well, that should have worked. Pane, destroy current pane. Really? Pane, destroy, right? Wow. Okay, so I'm going to take a different tack. I don't know what's going on, but let's just move everything to one view. And then what we'll do is we'll use Origami to create a pane below. And then I'm going to go into that pane, and I'm going to use Origami to create a pane to the right. And then I'm going to put the shell over there, and I'm going to put the main test over there, and there we have it, right? So that's kind of what we were looking for. And now let me go ahead and see if we can do this theme for Terminus. So I created an 8-fold theme, and I didn't spend that much time on it, so I don't want you thinking that I'm doing too much outside of these videos, because they're supposed to be unscripted and that sort of a thing. But so if we bring up Terminus, I can say generate user theme, and remove that. Am I missing the window? Oh, right. So it doesn't bring up a panel, and that's kind of annoying. But if I come into library, application support, and come down to Sublime Text, packages, user, you can see where it says Terminus. Terminus color scheme. And I can bring this up here and I can say paste. And as soon as I save, it uses that theme. And so as you can see now, all of the panes have the same background color, as well as it's using the same reds and greens as the code. So with all that said, that's kind of the housekeeping for today. Now, with regard to this, what I wanted to look at is there were a couple of things, right? And the biggest one is when we look at the string file, the string class, it seems very deliberate. It seems, pretty well thought out, arguably. And, it's just very methodical, right? But if I look at the test file, on the other hand, I don't get that sense. It's kind of more of a hodgepodge, and test files can get, this way. So let me just go ahead and bring that up here and increase the font size here. All right, like we just have, we're kind of all over the place. Or not consistent with what strings we're testing against, or how we're testing them, or how we're writing them, really, outside of standard convention. They're all in the same place. I mean, it's also 330 lines, which I'm not a big line counter, but that's hard to navigate over time, right? And so what I really want to do is kind of take sort of slow down and take a hint from qualitycoding.org, right? And so qualitycoding.org was set up by a gentleman, I believe he used to work at Yahoo or Google, and he became this real evangelist for TDD. And he's got a lot of really good stuff. Highly recommend checking him out. At least he did when I used to watch him regularly. So, and one of the things that he talks about with regard to the TDD waltz, which is what he described, or what he calls the red-green refactor of TDD, is you shouldn't just be refactoring the production code. You should be refactoring your tests, because tests are code, right? Now there's an argument about recursion that we could get into, but that's sort of his premise, right? And so basically, that's kind of what I'm going to look at right now, or that we're going to look at today. So first things first. Test can initialize, right? And what we're testing is that we can initialize that string class. Now, the thing about it is that one of the sort of guiding principles that I at least live by when it comes to TDD is you don't test other people's code, right? So the only thing that happens inside of this test is pretty much default language behavior, right? And is that really worth testing? I mean, if that was the only way that I tested that a class exists, sure. But we have a bunch of others, right? Test can initialize, empty, so on and so forth, right? So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and delete that just because it's testing other people's code. Now with test can initialize empty, now that's our code, right? str static method call empty. And we want to make sure that we don't get null. That's awesome. Test empty string is empty, though. All it does is the exact same thing that's happening up here and then calls a method on it. And it actually finishes proving the question of whether or not this string is empty. So instead of doing this down here in its own test case, right, I'm going to put two assertions in the same test. Now, this isn't the first time we've done this, but it's the first time that we're going to talk about it. Some people think this is a horrible idea, right? every test and every assertion needs to have its own test. Keep the boundaries clean, and I'm just not that guy. Now, if you end up, putting 40 assertions into one test, yeah, you probably aren't doing unit tests. You're probably doing something else. But we should be able to just say result, empty, come down here, and we should see one less test because we deleted the can initialize, and we should see, I think, one more assertion, or no, the same amount of assertions because we also deleted one assertion. So at that point, right, and that's what we see, one less test, same amount of assertions. So at this point, we can get rid of, so test can initialize empty string, right, and now we should lose one test and one assertion. We do, so that's great. All right, next. Test can initialize with string. And now here, what I want to do is I want to look at this, right? And the reason I want to look at that is because it's going to appear a lot, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, right? It's there. It is a fundamental part of our program, right? Or at least our tests. So when it comes to dry, right, like don't repeat yourself, there have been arguments made where it's like, any string, you should not be putting strings inside of your functions, inside of your method calls. You should be storing those as properties that then you bring into the rest of the world, which is fine. But it got me thinking, or it's gotten me thinking about how just random we are with our tests, right? Here we're testing effectively ASCII plus UTF-8 or some type of Unicode string. Here it's all Unicode. And then let's see, here it's a different version of, it's basically, again, the plain text plus Unicode, plain text plus Unicode, plain text plus Unicode, nothing but plain text here, nothing but Unicode here, right? So we're kind of all over the place, though, with what these characters are. Now, when we do tests, if we're trying to be, I hesitate to use the term, if we're trying to be scientific about it, we want to change as few variables as possible, right? And so it'd be nice if the tests were using similar strings to deal with stuff. So basically we have plain text, right? And then we have Unicode, and then we have plain text plus Unicode, and then we have something that I'll call the problem child, which is compound Unicode. And we may not have time to get into that today, but like that's kind of what we're dealing with. So what I would like to see, right, as the next sort of refactoring is, let's go ahead and just say function. I am going to make it private, right, and we'll talk about that maybe here in a minute. And I'm just going to say plain text, right? And so what private is going to do is it's going to limit who can access this, or from where this function can be accessed. And basically private means that it can only be accessed from within this closure, right? So this where the opening curly brace all the way to the closing curly brace. Outside of that, nobody can see it, nobody can call it, it doesn't exist, right? And so let's go ahead and copy, right? And so we're going to do plain text. So there's that. And so now we're going to do the EGV thing. So E, just to lock that in, this plain text, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to hit G, and I'm going to paste, right? So expected, so on and so forth. G, paste, G, paste. And I'm kind of going slow because I want to make sure that the casings are correct and that basically what just happened doesn't happen again. So G, V, G, V, G, V, G, V, G, V, G, V. All right. So that doesn't appear anywhere. So we should be able to say, right? And it's the same. It's the same amount of tests and the same amount of assertions, right? Nothing has changed. So that's just refactoring. We're just changing the internal structure of the code. All right. So the next one up is Unicode only, right? And so we do fun private Unicode returns string, and we're going to want to return. Okay, so we could choose this one, right, because it's 3 globes in a row, but it's the only time that 3 globes in a row appears. So I'm just going to not choose that one. Everything else kind of remains the same. We could, well, so this is Unicode plus plain text, but again, there's not a lot of places where we do 5 globes and that sort of a thing. So kind of just keep cruising. Now see, this is the actual plain text one. That's, See, I actually messed up. So let's go back up here. And since I'm going to have to change that name, yeah, let's plain text with Unicode. Oops, copy. No, I'm going to take the parentheses with me, so copy those. And then what I'm going to search for is plain text. So plain text with Unicode, plain text with Unicode, plain text with Unicode. And so the nice part is, right, that we can change this out, right? Like say we come up with a better string to cover more of our examples. Then, you know, we can totally just change that string, and it's changed for everybody, for better and worse. All right, so return hello world. All right, so now if I do copy or Command E, Command G, this is where we go. This plain text, copy G, paste, and it no longer appears anywhere else in our text. All right, so that's plain text with Unicode, and now we're back to searching for the straight Unicode. So basically, I'm thinking this is it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's going to be it. So let's go with copying that and slide back up to the top, and we're going to paste that. Hit enter. Now we want to do E, Command E, G, this Unicode, Command C, G, V, G, V, G, V, G, V, G, V, 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 and we're back at the top, and it's nowhere to be found in the rest of our code. All right, so plain text, Unicode, plain text with Unicode, compound Unicode. Like I said, we might talk about that later. All right, so test is empty string. This is good. Test can initialize with that. Test can count characters. Test can initialize from file. All right, now this should probably be up here, right? Because it seems like we have some patterns emerging. So let's take a look at these patterns, right? This is sort of testing the initializers. And so, can we initialize with a string? Can we initialize an empty string? So on and so forth. And this is more about I want to say metadata, right? Like it's not manipulation, it's metadata about the string. How long are you? How many characters do you have? Do you contain this character? That kind of a thing. This, on the other hand, these are operations, right? So because what we're doing is we're appending something onto the end of the string, right? So here we're just trying to get data about the string. Here we're actually trying to say, okay, I want to manipulate or change this string, right? And so same thing with that one. Test can append string from file twice, right? Because we wanted to make sure that we could do it that way in a repeating way. We're inserting a character. We're inserting multi-byte characters. We're inserting from a file. We're replacing a subrange. We're replacing a subrange reversed. Right? Like we took the, instead of replacing world with the globe, we took the globe and replaced it with the world or something. I can't even remember. We're removing this, removing that. And it's kind of, if we go into the docs for Swift, right, like it's kind of separating things out the way they have them separated, but maybe we're going to do it a little bit different. So can remove, can drop, we're still manipulating, still all this. Now, drop actually returns a string, right? Yeah. So with all of those, we're actually manipulating the string, and that's what we're dealing with. It doesn't return an actual string. So here we're getting a new string, right? Like we're getting new string or new character. Can pop last. This is lowercase, but it's returning that string, right? Like we're not having to explicitly call string, right? If we do, we get an error. In fact, here, like, just in case you missed all the other videos, right? We get an error because you can't, because lowercase returns a string, therefore you can't call string on it. So test can get uppercased string, same thing. Test can check equality. All right, so check equality. So now we're checking things, right? So this is back to comparison and metadata, right? Is this like the other thing, right? Can check, does it contain a prefix? Does it contain a suffix? And then can split on character. Right, and so this, and what this is doing, just like we were returning a string before, now we're returning an array, right? We're returning an array or a collection. And so can split does return blocks and that sort of a thing, right? So we have different areas that we can go to. And so what I'm going to do is, I want to pick one that's got something. Why isn't that plain text? I'm missing the comma? Probably. No. Like, I would expect us to... That's weird. Is this one missing the comma? Oh. Didn't capitalize the world. I think I'm wanting to. Plain text with Unicode, so... Huh. Anyway, gonna have to come to that later. All right, so I'm gonna call these manipulations. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do Command KB to open up the file drawer, and I'm gonna create a new file, and I'm going to call it manipulation test.php. Right, and then I'm going to basically do a copy of the whole thing and paste it in. And now, for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of using the PHP unit framework test case, we're going to use our own. So 8-fold string tests main test, right? Then what we're going to say is we're going to say that we extend main test. Okay. Now, what that means is that I'm going to get access to everything that is up here, all 300 something lines, right? And not only that, but PHP will look at any of the manipulations methods as being me overriding them. Okay, and we'll talk about that later. So what that means is that I should be able to delete all of the initializers, delete all of the metadata, leave the manipulations, and we're going to delete all of the new strings. And all the comparisons. And all of the arrays. And now I've only got 148 lines that I can then easily scan through to look at how I'm manipulating things. Now, yeah, let's see what happens. So in theory, PHP unit should still run all of our tests, right? Because we have, if you remember from the PHP unit.xml file, basically we've told it everything that's in the test directory that ends in test.php run, right? Unless specifically told otherwise. And our manipulation has test at the end of it, right? Because it's manipulation test.php. So it should try to run every test that is in the main test and manipulation test. So let's see what we get. Cannot redeclare test, right? So I'm redeclaring main test. So let's do manipulation test. So that's not a thing anymore, right? And now look, 66 tests, 82 assertions, right? It's crazy. And that's because it's all in here too, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete all the manipulations. Right. So delete the manipulations, and on top of that, well, let's do one thing at a time. So 54, 65, I still think that's a little creepy, but you know, it's good times nonetheless. They are all passing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete these private functions. And at that point, I should get an error. Somebody should get angry. All right. So 9 errors. And the reason being, right, is that, like I said before, private means that only the class itself can do this. And even though we extend, right, even though manipulation test extends main test, it is not within the curly braces or the closure. So PHP offers one way to solve this problem in the form of protected. Now, when you go with something like this, where you're changing the access of a thing, basically what you're doing is favoring inheritance over composition, which is fine. I mean, people can debate it all day long, and I will myself, but at the end of the day, the same thing is accomplished, right? Now, Swift, the creators of the Swift library, think that something like protected, which PHP isn't the only language that has it, right? I think Java has it and things like that. What they think is, or their position is that protected, something like protected as an access control level, is conflating two different concepts. It's conflating the concept of access control with object hierarchy and inheritance, right? So, so there is that. Now, the issue that I have is I have no way, there's no visual indicator inside of this manipulation test class that tells me, hey, this is where that function lives, right? When I see this plain text with Unicode, right, I can't, to the best of my knowledge anyway, oops, I can't do Command P and then at and then plain text, right? Like it can't find it because it's not in this class. I have to know that it's in the other class and then go to there and then do the Command P at plain text, right? So another alternative that I prefer is going to be to create a trait. And so it's going to be, let me make that bigger. So namespace, save this, I guess, and we're going to say test strings trait. No, test strings. We'll just leave it at test strings.php. All right, so namespace, 8-fold string tests. We're not going to use anything, I don't think, because they're just strings. So we can say trait, and we can say test strings. And so you can see that the setup is very much, it's very similar to a class and things like that. So we're trying to keep things consistent. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those and then comment them out. And then I'm going to paste them into here. And I'm going to put them back to being private. So private, private, and private. And so what's nice about this, they're all in one place. They're completely isolated from our actual functional and logical code. And we're good, right? So now that we have that and we have this, what I'm going to do, so now, right, the only thing that I needed from main test were those functions. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out, and then now, instead of manipulation test inheriting from main test, which inherits from this test case class, which may inherit from something else, we took that hierarchy and broke it down by 1. Of course, if I do this, we see that we have 23 errors because all of the things that are trying to call these functions. So what a trait does, and this is why we talk about the difference between inheritance and composition, is that basically what a trait does is we're going to say eightfold string, and what did we call it? Test strings, right? And so what a trait does is it actually injects it directly into the class at runtime, right? So whereas with inheritance, you sort of get it just by extension, right? And you don't get to pick and choose or cherry pick from that parent class. With traits, you are picking and choosing, right? So it's much more, it's more akin to biology, right? Because with class inheritance, the parent class, you get it all, right? You get your mom's eyes and your dad's eyes. You get your, mom's feet and your dad's feet. Like, that's not the way biology works. Biology is kind of more like a blend, and you've got these weird mutation things. And so basically, like, that's what we're looking at, is basically we're saying we want this class to have these other attributes, when it gets instantiated. So now if we run this, test strings not found. Did I give it the right namespace? I did. Eightfold string tests. Test strings. All right, so now we have 9 errors. So we're doing better. And then basically what we should be able to do is take that use statement, put that there, use test strings, test case, da, 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 da. So let's make sure it works. Okay, and so the argument can still be made against traits that they don't really solve the problem of where did this function come from. But the problem isn't necessarily where did the function come from. It's how far in the hierarchy did it come from, right? Because, so I remember working in Objective-C years ago, every object in Objective-C inherited from NS object, right? Next step object. And you might be, I mean, they kept it really compact. They really tried to keep it a flattened hierarchy, but you could still be 5 or 6 deep. And so I could call a method and it could be on the original NS object, but I have to trace my steps all the way back. And I think if object-oriented programming has given us nothing else, it's really good documentation tools for being able to navigate high or deep hierarchies of object inheritance. Whereas with a trait, I can just kind of look at it and go, okay, well, it might come from here. Let me look, right? Yes or no. Oh, well, if there's another one, let me look, let me look, let me look. It's kind of the best of both worlds between multiple inheritance and just straight adherence to biology. But so there we go. We've got, I think, a better layout for our panes, right? We've got a really nice big window at the top. We've got, I think, a really nice setup with regard to the tests and the terminal being where they are, and they're color coded. Yay! Everything's color coordinated. And so what I'm going to do though is next time I do want to kind of continue splitting things out a little bit, just to get an idea and a better feel around what does this class do really, right? Is it really about string manipulation? Is it really heavy on returning the string? Is it really heavy on, just changing one thing or a bunch of things? And so, yeah, just kind of going to continue refactoring these tests, and kind of take it from there and see where that gets us. So, as always, thanks for making the time. I appreciate it, and I'll see you around.